Let's get into it. 16 games. I know Pat is so excited to talk about every single team on the slate this weekend, and let's do it. Let's start off with the aforementioned Christmas Day game. The Minnesota Vikings, the New Orleans Saints, 7-point favorites. The Saints are 10-4, a 51 total in this game. Hayden, we saw last week Drew Brees returning to action. It was not an overall positive, and it probably isn't going to be better with Michael Thomas being out. But what that also points me in the direction of, if you are a DFS player, Alvin Kamara should absolutely have to carry this offense to whatever victory they're going to have.
Absolutely, and that will just be tenfold if Eric Kendricks can't play again. He's one of the best coverage linebackers in the entire NFL. And if he's not there, I don't know who on Minnesota is going to plan on tackling Alvin Kamara. So, yeah, I mean, he's a rebound candidate. If you're DFS slate, of course, you're picking Alvin Kamara. I do think that there's Marquez Callaway could be a sleeper for those that are like a 14-team league that need like a flex guy possibly. We'll have to track injury reports. He's due back, and I think that he would be the number 2. But, yeah, we know where to go here. I think Emmanuel Sanders, you want him in the lineup rather than out of the lineup, despite like a lot of the struggles that they had last week. But he's still the number 1 receiver. And I think that Drew Brees, after another week of kind of like feeling things out, he should be a little more prepared.
It's like not the full-on apocalypse of Drew Brees. I mean, it could be because he looked physically diminished last week. You know, it was like the big concern, but he played most of the season already without Michael Thomas. And most of those weeks, like somehow found a way, like 280 yards and 2 touchdowns. So hopefully last week was just like a rust-knocking game and not like a sign that Drew Brees is nowhere close to right physically. But, yeah, I mean, if that was just him getting his feet wet and he'll be back to normal, Drew Brees he'll stay in like the top 15 or 16 at quarterback, and he'll spring some of these guys. I mean, Emmanuel Sanders is a pretty darn good play this week, I guess, even though it doesn't feel great. Marquez Callaway is interesting. They don't have to update his status yet because he's still on the injured reserve, but we will know like 24 hours before Friday. So totally agree. I mean, he had a 10-target game earlier this season, so he's definitely someone to monitor. And, not the most explosive fantasy game, but hopefully Drew Brees looks much more physically ready this week.
The only issue for the Saints is that they won't be afforded an up-tempo game script. We know how the Vikings want to play, a sluggish offense, whereas the Saints defense, even in limiting Patrick Mahomes to a season-low 5.4 yards per attempt, still had 40 more plays run against them by the Chiefs, just firing off lightning-quick snaps, and the Vikings won't do that. So this I expect to be a sluggish and slow game, and hopefully Brees is more efficient, and that was just a blip on the radar last week because, as you said, that did not look good.
What I am concerned about, Pat, is like Drew Brees going to, Green Bay in the playoffs and having to play outdoors with how he played last week and how he's played this season. That would be terrifying. And I also want chaos. And part of me would love for Drew Brees to play poorly now. And then we head into week 17, openly questioning, without Michael Thomas, if this offense is better with Taysom Hill at the helm because of his rushing upside that he offers, or if it's better with Drew Brees out there. And Pat, I think that might be a possibility, and I think that might be a fair question based on how Brees played last week.
Yeah, I mean, apparently coming back from 45 broken ribs is not that easy.
And you joke about 45. It was 11. So like, that's not too much of a difference. I didn't even know we had 11 ribs.
Yeah, that is true. There was no real need to exaggerate it, but me being me, I still did. It's also weird to Drew Brees. It's going to be like, he can't get his like end of season, like narratives or memes consistent because I think for a few years, the meme, he would like be coming into the playoffs playing poorly. Last year, he came into the playoffs playing like red hot and then played extremely poorly against the Vikings. So yeah, it's like his play down the stretch is like a wild card, even when he's at full health. And, it's going to be – we could be getting some very boiling hot Taysom takes down the stretch.
I will say real quick, if you have any pessimistic thoughts with the Saints, they're projected for 29 3/4 points. That's the 3rd highest on the slate. So, like, Vegas is very encouraged. So, if you either have to go by that and play Emmanuel Sanders, play Jared Cook, maybe play Drew Brees in like a 12-team league, or just go bet against the Saints because you can't be – teetering on both ends here.
Yeah, we spent too much time on this side of the ball, but I do want to add that I believe Mike Zimmer's done a great job against Drew Brees the last times they've played, like 19, 24, 23, and 20 points the last 4, I should say. But I think, Hayden, what you're alluding to also is that this is not the same Vikings defense that teams have played in the past. So many injuries, just worse talents overall, 0 pass rushers. So while Mike Zimmer might be doing better against average to bad quarterbacks, the great quarterbacks this year are still getting home. So Drew Brees should be able to do that. Quickly, Daigle, anything on the Vikings end? Because we know who it is. It's one of the more linear offenses in the NFL in terms of Dalvin Cook, Adam Thielen, and Justin Jefferson against a defense that, while had some missteps a couple weeks ago, shouldn't this week.
And we've seen the last 3 games together now, Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson. Jefferson actually leads with 31 targets among the two, has somewhat emerged now from Kirk Cousins. And Cousins was afforded a little softer schedule last week because the Bears went in without 2 starting cornerbacks and a starting safety, whereas the Saints seem to be clicking on full cylinders on that side of the ball. So a bit of a tougher matchup again and slow, but you know exactly where to target. I would say the only shakeup is that Jefferson should be ranked ahead of Thielen finally.
Cool. All right, let's move on. The 9-5 Tampa Bay Buccaneers are 9.5-point favorites on the road against the Detroit Lions. A 54 total in this game. Pat, my one question, we talked about it in the brief video that we do for Genesis each week. Where is Leonard Fournette in the rankings? Because this is a player who we thought we were done with. We're not done with. Guess what? He's absolutely established in our lives in week 16 because Ronald Jones almost certainly will not play in this game. And Leonard Fournette got home in those 2 short touchdowns last week. Pat, should he be in lineups this week?
Yeah, the answer to where he is in my rankings is too high. In the rankings video I did, I believe I was talking as if I had him as the RB 17 or 18. I have since moved him up to the RB 14 or 15, which some people will not do as some other good rankers if I'm a good ranker. But in the case, it's just so straightforward. I mean, they're almost 10-point favorites. There's no touch competition whatsoever. The Lions allow the most running back fantasy points. The Bucs are going to have drives to finish. Mike Evans is going to get tackled at the 1 and the 3 yard line again this week. But the matchup is too good. The setup is too good that I feel like at the very least you have to get him in the top 20, and really you need him in the top 18.
Initially, when I saw the 2 short touchdowns before watching the game, I thought, oh, so he just luck boxed a couple scores. Still not good usage, but the usage was there. Outsnapped LaShawn McCoy 45-12 and handled 87% of the team's running back carries. Was basically the only used running back. So yeah, it's again, like Pat said, a terrific matchup for a team that has the 2nd highest team total on the entire slate, and this over and the Bucs side keeps continue to get bet up.
Yeah, I mean, that translated to 19.5 expected fantasy points for Leonard Fournette last week. I mean, he's if Ronald Jones is out with this matchup, I think that he's an RB1, honestly. And I have Tom Brady ranked really high too. I mean, the Bucs are projected for 31.5 points here, and the Lions defense is not getting healthier. They have no corners. Their best defensive tackle is out. It's just, I mean, it's all systems go, honestly.
You left out, they have no coaches either, apparently, on the defensive side of the ball due to COVID-19 contact tracing.
Well, they haven't had too many coaches this entire year, so I didn't want to adjust too much.
There we go. Hayden, I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but what does the fantasy usage model say about the Bucs wide receivers over the last 4 weeks, meaning Antonio Brown, Chris Godwin, and Mike Evans?
Yeah, I think everyone's kind of clumping them together too much. Mike Evans is the alpha here. He's averaged 15.5 expected fantasy points since AB's been there, and he's just been a baller like the entire season, even battling some of these injuries. So I have Mike Evans as a wide receiver 1. Chris Godwin and Antonio Brown are the 2 that I have more concerns with. Chris Godwin over the last 4 weeks is the wide receiver 51 in fantasy usage. His ADOT is so low. They're basically using him as just like a low ADOT slot receiver, which is really unfortunate. I think the matchup is too good to bench Chris Godwin or Antonio Brown in like a standard sized league, but I do not want to put Mike Evans in the same tier as Chris Godwin because that is just simply not the case right now.
Hey, I gotta say, you were ahead of the curve on that with your model because like last week you had him way higher than I did and a lot of people did, and I think he had only cleared 70 yards like once since like week 3 or 4, but that was like definitely something the model saw. Like the usage was remaining really, really good, and like the blow up you had last week was overdue.
I think the difference is if you're only looking at targets, they're going to be more similar in like target share, but the difference is Mike Evans is winning downfield, which is more efficient for fantasy receivers, and he's winning in the red zone. The other two receivers aren't getting the same amount of touches. So if you're only looking at targets, you're kind of missing some of these other underlying variables.
And this week, they presumably won't be down 24-7 in the third quarter. So there probably aren't as many targets to go around.
Daigle, no team has allowed more running back receptions than the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this season, which is kind of crazy to think about with how good they are defensively. Maybe it's because of a negative game script or just how they line up. Who knows? But DeAndre Swift has seemingly gotten more and more opportunity each week. Confidence in him.
And we saw in his second game back from injury, that's where the ball is going to go through the air if it goes that way. 65% of the team snaps, all 5 of their running back targets, and of course 4 of 6 of the team's touches inside the 10-yard line. It was negative game script. It was garbage time when he got his second touchdown. Even so, the fact they had him out there means he's clearly healthy and good to go. So we know we don't want to attack the Bucs on the ground, but Swift's usage, especially since we know he'll be used in the passing game, is all too good. So you just take the high total overall and get pieces here, and Swift is the piece you want, especially because it seems like Kenny Galladay's already moved on to his next team in free agency.
Yeah, and Marvin Jones has been absolutely unreal. I mean, what a player. It seems like year after year, I know this isn't the case, but he just closes so well, and then slow start again, closes really well. But Marvin Jones is low-key one of my favorite players in the NFL. All right, moving on. San Francisco 49ers, Arizona Cardinals. Cardinals 8-6, 5-point favorites here in this game, 48.5 total. Pat, over the last 2 weeks, we've talked a lot about Brandon Ayuk, and I would say over the last 3 or 4 games, he has played. I mean, he's being a legitimate wide receiver 1 with Deebo Samuel, without Deebo Samuel. Now, Raheem Mostert certainly isn't going to play in this game either. So now we have Jeff Wilson. And because of that, Pat, and because of this Arizona defense, I would say it's middle ground. Both of those probably locked-in players in your starting lineup. But then the wrench of C.J. Beathard is thrown into this. Not like Nick Mullins is a great player or anything. But I would just say we don't know very much about C.J. Beathard, despite him starting in this league at one point.
Yeah, it's something like his 11th or 12th career start. And there's one other potential wrench, which is the possible return of George Kittle from his foot injury. It actually sounds maybe more likely than not to happen. We're recording on Wednesday afternoons. So we don't really know yet, but he was kind of targeting this game, and he's the kind of player he will not accept a shutdown. So he could be coming back. He college teammates with C.J. Beathard. Am I really making that up?
Confirm, yes.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. And I know a lot of those college facts. I just remember. Anyways, but. So moving parts of the 40, because too, it's just Jeffrey Wilson at running back. They've completely mothballed Tevin Coleman and Jerick McKinnon. Can that center hold this week? Can it really just be Jeffrey Wilson? And yeah, very fascinating offense. Kendrick Bourne too. By the way, I know my thoughts are all over the place right now. People continually sleep on Kendrick Bourne too much. I think he's honestly in the kind of the top 48, top 50, right in that wide receiver 4 periphery. If you're in a deeper league, where he's been getting kind of very quietly steady targets over the past month. So, but yeah, a very chaotic, tough to predict offense this week.
We'll see what happens with George Kittle as well. It sounds like he's practicing almost in full, which is odd. Kyle Shanahan 2 weeks ago said he's going to let the game against the Cowboys decide George Kittle's fate. They lost, and yet Kittle's still on the practice field trending towards playing. And of course, maybe he does re-aggravate his injury. Every player literally that's come back from injury this year for the 49ers has re-aggravated their injury, but it's a tight end position. So, what are you going to do? Not start George Kittle if you have him? So, yeah, you just play him if he's there.
Hayden, we saw a little dip in play for a bit there for Kyler Murray, but based on what he's shown recently, he's absolutely trustable, even against the San Francisco defense, which, again, at points has given opponents difficulty. But he's trustable in the fantasy championship, isn't he?
Yeah, if you look at his rushing splits, he's basically the last 2 weeks reverted back to where he was for the first 10 weeks. Basically, you're going to look at these when we go into next year's rankings. There's a 3-year blimp where he was dealing with a shoulder injury and he wasn't running that much. That's gone basically back all the way where he was early in the season. This isn't the greatest matchup, but Kyler Murray's automatically going to be a top 6, top 7 play. Cardinals are projected for the 10th most points, and we kind of saw Kenyon Drake kind of get phased out of the offense. I don't know if that was injury related or what the deal is, but if Kenyon Drake's not out there and they're going with Chase Edmonds, I think that's a win for Kyler Murray, because that means that they're going to pass the ball more, which could end up leading for more scrambles as well.
All right, those were 2 Saturday games. Let's close with the final Saturday game, the Miami Dolphins and the Las Vegas Raiders. Again, Miami 9-5 this year, 3-point favorites on the road. Daigle, do you know if we're getting Marcus Mariota And if so, how does that impact the game? Because he came in last week, maybe played more aggressive, more assertive than we've ever seen Marcus Mariota play in his life. We love rushing quarterbacks. Could we get another one?
I know what Gruden was saying in camp, that Mariota was not ready to even be backup, but he outplayed Derek Carr and just coming off the bench last week. Having said that, Derek Carr is practicing, limited, but practicing, and sounds like he's at least very much trying to play, probably because how well Mariota played. Also, it's just a rough matchup against Miami's secondary, whereas their offense continues to be interchangeable depending who is available out there with the scheme. The defense isn't going away, still tried and true, so still a rough matchup for the Raiders.
Yeah, they were both receiving first-team reps on Tuesday. Like John said, I think Derek Carr saw that and was like, oh, boy, I better get out there. The second most rushing yards of Marcus Mariota's career. It was the game, basically. We always begged for Marcus Mariota to have with the Titans. He was just never assertive as a runner. A lot of it was because he got injured so much and maybe he just didn't want to aggravate injuries, didn't want to suffer new injuries. I mean, he was running like with purpose. Like he was running angry and like, visibly showing emotion. I know I'm getting into like dumb narrative street here, but like you like never saw that with Marcus Mariota on the Titans. And he was basically playing like a new player. He threw a few hospital balls as a passer, but he hit a few deep balls. He had some really feathery touch on some passes. Like it was a very impressive performance. Yeah, against this tough Dolphins pass defense. I mean, if the Raiders want to win this game and keep alive their 1% playoff odds, they're going to need Marcus Mariota's dual threat.
Hayden, on the Dolphins side, seems like Myles Gaskin is back from the COVID protocol. We saw Salvon Ahmed have a big day. We've seen Matt Breida be involved after, keeping him from us for so long. We've also seen Lynn Bowden, who has running back status on some leagues, get touches. How are you looking and deciphering this Miami skill position group right now?
Well, the Dolphins have ended up just picking a bell cow in each game and just running with it. Most of the time, it's been Myles Gaskin. And in fact, when Myles Gaskin's been healthy, he has been the guy. But we've seen DeAndre Washington run as the number one. We've seen Salvon Ahmed. I think it's going to be Myles Gaskin. I'm a little less confident now just because we've seen other guys in the same role, and we don't know how truly healthy Gaskin is. But I do think that he's in like the RB2 mix. It's not the greatest floor, I would say, but I think there's plenty of upside against the Raiders, who are last in rushing EPA. So we just have to keep an eye on the news. It's still early, but right now it seems like Myles Gaskin is going to be the lead back.
It could be a different offense altogether. We saw Tua have 48 and 39 pass attempts in the 2 games prior to last week when he only had 26 compared to 37 running back carries. And Ahmed did handle 24 of the team's 40 backfield touches, but it was just a different game plan altogether because Parker and Gesicki weren't available. So if Parker and Gesicki are good to go, I think Tua comes back into the realm as a low-end QB2 or a QB2 superflex starter as well.
Yeah, Tua needs some help. I mean, he was having to manufacture everything last week, and the stat line still looked like it was garbage. To me, my eye test was in the lab. He looked good, and he looked decisive, and he looked like he was making plays, so I'm excited to see what he can do against this Raiders defense.
Lynn Bowden has led the team in routes run in 2 weeks in a row. Like, that's his – what else is he going to throw to? Like, what is he doing?
I mean, dare I say we're 24 minutes into the show, and it's the Lynn Bowden revenge game. I mean, less than 9 months into his career, he already has a revenge game. Golly, guys. All right.
2020, man.
2020. Let's go. Let's go to Sunday. Giants, Baltimore Ravens. Ravens at home, 11-point favorites. We know they are 9-5. Pat, we know everyone is on J.K. Dobbins. But what about Marquise Brown? Like 3 or 4 straight weeks of either a touchdown or 60-plus yards. Sometimes both. Ooh, I'm getting a little tingly just talking about him, Pat, that I might want to put him in my starting lineup here in the fantasy championship.
Yeah, it's 6 catches for 98 yards last week where the game was functionally over in the first half. So that was very encouraging. He was still getting targets when the game was well over in the third quarter. This has been something, too, that this is another thing, narrative street, but you can kind of see it on the field. Like Lamar Jackson, coming over and talking to Marquise Brown, kind of trying to you can almost see them trying to will this into existence because they need it desperately. They don't really have much of a shot in the playoffs. If there's not finally some chemistry between Marquise Brown and Lamar Jackson, they have to have a weapon in the passing game other than Mark Andrews. And it kind of like Jonathan Taylor, someone we had sky high expectations for entering the season, flashed a little early in the season, then just a really like dark, cold 2 months, finally reemerging at the end of the season. And he is someone I see legitimate reasons for optimism. They just need this so bad. Like they have so much incentive to just make this connection happen.
Yeah. It seems like they've made a point, like to start games when he went on that little bit of a streak and got lucky catching that Trace McSorley pass. That they're like, no, we want to establish this connection early on. Diego, I mentioned J.K. Dobbins, but he has to be considered a top 7 running back this week.
Close.
Too high?
Low end RB1, but he's still sharing with Gus Edwards, and rightfully so. Dobbins, and remember, the Ravens still have something to play for. Even in winning this game, they can't gain an edge in the tiebreaker against the Dolphins, who own the tiebreaker over them because they're playing out of conference. And they healthy scratched when needing to win Mark Ingram. So I would expect that to happen yet again. Not only this game, but for the rest of the season. This past week, Dobbins outsnapped Gus Edwards 35-27, outtouched him 15-11. And Edwards, of course, continues making plays just like Dobbins. So I think, to your point, both are still have standalone value. Dobbins a low-end RB1, in my opinion, and Gus Edwards a middle, maybe a fringe RB1, but RB2 for sure in this spot. The Giants front 7, of course, is tough. We prefer to attack them through the air, but this Ravens team is just rolling on all cylinders right now. It really would be a shame to not see them in January, especially when we had to watch whatever the hell that was the Steelers were doing on prime time ahead of them.
Hayden, anything you want to say about this game? Because I know on the other side that it seems like Daniel Jones is coming back, but maybe you're different than me. I can't get excited about starting any Giants on a weekly basis right now.
Yeah, Giesen is canceled. Evan Ingram somehow made the Pro Bowl. I mean, it might be one of the worst Pro Bowl seasons ever. He's like kind of like on the like top 12 borderline, but I mean, against the Ravens, I mean, they're projected for 17 points. That's the worst on the slate. So yeah, you hopefully aren't starting somebody in the finals. And quite frankly, if you were drafting Giants, you're not in the finals, so we can move on.
Well, Hayden, I want to ask you about this next game: the Cincinnati Bengals and the Houston Texans. Texans at home. 8.5-point favorites, 46 total here, because I am starting Chad Hansen. I started Chad Hansen last week. You know, I have some lineup troubles here as we're getting deep into the playoffs. But Chad Hansen, it's like in every week, wide receiver 3, if not better, a wide receiver 2, wide open for his touchdown. I'll say it's because of his route running and not because of a defensive meltdown. Why shouldn't I be starting Chad Hansen this week?
I hate to be the party pooper. Here are his expected fantasy points in his 3 starts: 11.6. 10.4 and 5.0 last week. He's been like balling out for his usage. Am I going to be betting on Chad Hansen sustaining like insane efficiency on this low volume? I'm not going to do it. But I've heard of worse wide receiver 4s in this matchup. Obviously, the Bengals are playing a little bit better, but I still believe in Brandon Cooks and Kiki Kuti ahead of Chad Hansen right now.
So you're basically saying he's not A.J. Brown?
No. I'm going to bet against that one.
Got it.
Yeah, what you just described, that's what elite players do. Okay. Yeah, Hansen, hear me out. It's the end of the year, so I'm just going to go with this one. HZN Heesen.
No,
he's in this game too.
Yeah, when one season ends, another one begins in Pat's brain. Pat, I do want to ask you about David Johnson, though, because he's another one who fell out of relevancy for us at one point this year through his play and through injury and through usage. Well, last week, I believe he had over 10 targets. I don't know if that ever repeat itself, but I'm sure a lot of people want to go back to that well, facing, again, the Cincinnati Bengals.
It's tough to know what to do because, yeah, as a rusher last week, it just wasn't happening again. 8 carries for 27 yards, horrible rushing performance. And before last week, he had caught more than 2 passes only twice all season. And I think his season high was 4. So this was truly out of nowhere. It was with Duke Johnson out. I guess we did. I don't know if we know Duke's status this week. Maybe the running back targets will be a little stickier than we think because maybe this is more of an underneath offense with Will Fuller out and Brandon Cooks maybe at 100%. I'm not sure. So maybe we can more realistically expect 5 catches for David Johnson, but I mean, this was a total outlier, like with regards to his entire pre-Week 15 2020 performance.
Where do you have Giovanni Bernard ranked on the other side of the ball? Because it is a good matchup, but I really can't pinpoint or explain why he had 25 carries on Monday night outside of like the rest of the world, I guess, being upset that a 24-year-old danced on paint pregame.
He was one of the hardest guys to rank this week because for a while they had him hard capped at 10 to 12 touches.
Yeah.
Then he fumbled for like the first time since 2013, and then they benched him. And then his 25 carries against the Steelers, one of the toughest run defenses in the league, with the second most of his career. So I just frankly have no idea what to do. I mean, you can't just completely ignore that. It's probably an outlier, probably going to be back more like the 11 to 12 carry range, but I have like that RB 25 to 28 range where I have to give him some flex respect, basically, because it's not like I can pretend the 25 carries didn't happen.
And if you're in a pinch, I still think the Texans streaming defense is fine. Ron Finley passed for 89 yards. Like it wasn't a good performance. He just ran away and made plays, but we're not expecting that again.
Let's now go to the 7-7 Chicago Bears, who are 7.5-point favorites on the road against the Jacksonville Jaguars, a total of 47.5, with both teams rooting for the Bears in this contest. Hayden Winks. Let's talk about it. Not this past week. I think Mitch Trubisky only had like one touchdown. But we always look for matchups of defenses that absolutely suck. Guess what? Jaguars defense absolutely sucks. We've also seen Mitch Trubisky maybe recapture a little bit of that rushing form that we like. I mean, 34 yards, 23 yards, 8 rushes, 4 rushes, also 4 combined touchdowns in the last 2 weeks. I'm trying to sell you on this. I don't want to sell you on this, but I think Chicago itself is selling itself on bringing Mitch Trubisky back in 2021.
Oh, no. I'm just going to say the Bears, like you said, projected for 27.25 points. That's the 8th most on the week. So, like, I know we don't want to, like, have Mitchell Trubisky as like a borderline top 15, top 16 quarterback for the finals. But, I mean, they're using him a lot on these scrambles and some of these zone reads. And I think Bill Lazor's calling the plays, and I think that's helped. I think they're using more jet sweep, just more creativity. And I mean, Allen Robinson's balling. So yeah, we know where to go here. I will say, I think that Cole Kmet is still like a tight end 2 streamer type that we can target. Last week, Trubisky only had 21 pass attempts, but on the first drive, it was Cole Kmet, and he still ran 20 of 26 routes. So I think that if you are looking for a tight end 2 streamer, I think Cole Kmet makes a lot of sense this week.
I have that conundrum because I'm picking between Cole Kmet and Jonnu Smith, and it's probably something I'm going to last until Sunday trying to figure out. Pat, anything you want to say about this side in terms of either Jacksonville? James Robinson, it feels like he's missed a little bit of practice, but he's back in, and it seems like he's definitely going to play in this week.
Just to say, the Mitchell Trubisky is what happens when you pair a quarterback with an elite running back and David Montgomery. The 4 biggest fantasy outputs of his career over the past 4 weeks. I do have Trubisky in the top 16. James Robinson, I mean, he's someone where even if he was 100% healthy, I don't know where I would rank him this week because he had been set and forget top 10, and it seems like maybe finally this dismal state of this offense has caught up to him. And, you know, it's no secret now. I mean, they seem to really kind of be going for this for Trevor Lawrence. And, like, this is kind of an active tank, like the kind of you can almost just spot out in the open. So even if you told me James Robinson was 100% healthy, I think I'm going to have him more like the RB 16 to 18 range. But that his season does not align with that ranking. I just feel things trending in the wrong direction for him at the worst possible time for fantasy managers.
He's running fewer routes. Dario Lumbuale is like playing on passing downs. The last 2 weeks, James Robinson's expected fantasy points 10.8 and 13.3. He was at like 20 every single week before that. So I think they're scaling him back. Maybe he's a little banged up. They also aren't playing for much, or they're playing for Trevor Lawrence. So get James Robinson off the field. I agree with you. I might even go lower than like RB 18. He is like well off the RB1 radar for me. In this matchup, the workload's decreasing. What are they playing for? So I think, yeah, I would have a little more concerns with James Robinson.
That would be it for Divine Exhibit as well, is that even if he played for James Robinson, if Robinson unexpectedly was scratched here, Dario would still take passing down. So really, it's a lose-lose situation for both players.
Let's now go to the Atlanta Falcons, Kansas City Chiefs, a massive total of 54 in this game. And it's because the Chiefs, 13-1, are 10.5-point favorites. And we get Patrick Mahomes against the Atlanta Falcons defense in a potential moon matchup, John Daigle. But we know you're going to play Patrick Mahomes. If Tyreek Hill plays, you're playing him. Travis Kelce, obviously. Maybe even Sammy Watkins. We got to throw in that mention. But, Daigle, I have to ask you about Le'Veon Bell. We saw CEH go down with an injury. And even with his limited output, he was still probably in starting lineups and might even be on rosters or in the fantasy championships. How would you project Le'Veon Bell, who I would say has not looked explosive all year long, and we don't know how much of the work he's going to split with Darrell Williams?
I would imagine he still gets a majority of the touches. 15 carries this past week. I would have liked to see more passing game usage. He only had 1 target and caught it. But without Edwards-Helaire in a very good matchup against the Falcons, I would expect he still comes into Pat's rankings as a fringe RB1, Pat, RB13, RB14. That's where I settle at.
I've got him lower than that right now. I've got him kind of like the RB20 to 22 range. And
oh, interesting.
to me, I was talking myself into the idea almost that with Clyde Edwards-Helaire's health really uncertain, that this might be getting too galaxy brain too far out there, but they might actually try to save Le'Veon Bell's bullets at this point because this seems to be wrapped up, basically the #1 seed in the AFC, and maybe we see more Darrell Williams than we were expecting. And the Falcons do kind of a quietly tough running back matchup, but I'll just be honest, I would accept any answer for Le'Veon Bell. It was just a very tough situation for me to evaluate, and I just kind of faded. We've seen so little upside from him to begin with in this electric offense. I just kind of faded him a little bit to uncertain RB2 range.
Hayden, what about on the other side? We know Ito Smith was kind of named the starting running back. It doesn't even matter anymore in this Atlanta Falcons team. What makes me giddy is that if the total is 54, if the Falcons know their best bet is to pass the football in order to catch up in this game, this could be another Calvin Ridley just awesome play.
Yeah, he's averaging 19.7 PPR points without Julio. He's leading the NFL in air yards. No matter what split you use, the season, the last 4 games, last week, the Falcons have just completely given up on the run game, and I don't blame them at all. So it's going to Calvin Ridley. And if you're looking at targets, yes, his targets are insane, but he's also being utilized 15, 20 yards downfield, and that's the perfect spot where you want your fantasy receivers to be getting targeted. So yeah, he might be the #2. I think I only rank Devontae Adams ahead of Calvin Ridley, and I honestly might even switch that.
Ooh, big moves. I like it. All right. Unless there's anything else you guys want to say about that game, let's move on.
Just quickly on Ito Smith, I think he deserves a mention, because people will have a choice between Ezekiel Elliott, James Robinson, Ito Smith. I think he's right around that range. I would play him over Ezekiel Elliott this week. We'll get to the Cowboys game in a bit, but there are a lot of RB2s coming in this week injured, and that they may split touches. And I would rather just have Ito Smith's workload, especially with Gurley trending towards possibly being healthy scratched, than I would these other injured guys sharing touches.
I like it. I'm sure we'll designate the Ito Smith line on Sunday at Rotoworld Live. All right. Cleveland Browns, New York Jets, 10-4 Browns are 9.5-point favorites on the road, a total of 47. Pat, what we've seen is Baker Mayfield working behind a great offensive line, using play action passing, hitting his back foot, firing down the field, and that should be incredibly easy against a Jets defense that will be without Quinnen Williams. Dare I say, in the fantasy championship, to use that phrase once again, you can go to Jarvis Landry, you can go to Nick Chubb, and you can go to Kareem Hunt.
I've psyched myself out on the Browns passing attack because every week I'm Browns are going to run the hell out of the ball this week. Or, this is a tough matchup in the Ravens for Baker Mayfield, and I've had him way too low 3 straight weeks now, and I finally have him that QB 13 to 14 range. This is a motif we've talked about several times this season, but my fear is just that the Jets will just be too easy to just run over, and I just don't know. What are the odds Baker Mayfield attempts more than 30 passes in this game? 0%. So maybe I don't know what's the good attempts over under for Baker Mayfield, 22.5. Maybe he needs a Ryan Tannehill type day, but
which he's kind of turning into. He's kind of even without AJ Brown on that team, and no even Corey Davis or a Jonnu Smith, I would say someone who's great after the catch at the tight end position. He is kind of turning into this efficient passer because we know Baker Mayfield loves to show off his arm, loves to go downfield in those scenarios, and he's turning that efficiency into quality play at times, Pat.
His floor is extremely high this week. It's a great matchup. I just wouldn't get cute with it. You're not starting him over Watson, Brady, you would start him over Stafford, but just don't, with no rushing upside, just don't get cute with it.
I like that. Hayden, anything else we need to say about this one? It seems like pretty straightforward. On the Jets side, I don't really want to call attention to anyone on that side.
I want to defend Adam Gase's honor. Like, he was not trying to win this game, so don't pin this on him. This was not a stop the 0-16 game. They kicked 2 field goals inside the 7. They punted 5 times. They gave Frank Gore 23 carries. The Jets did everything they could to lose this game, and the Rams were just worse. So Adam Gase does not deserve the blame for costing the Jets Trevor Lawrence.
I'm sure he appreciates that. Okay, let's now go to a game with a lot of names that are important. The Indianapolis Colts, the Pittsburgh Steelers, a total of 45, 10-4 Colts, 11-3 Steelers, with the Colts 1.5-point favorites. Hayden, I want to start on the Steelers side because there were multiple points this season. And I would say starting in week, 2 or 3, we were questioning Ben Roethlisberger's arm. Like if he had it, if there was enough juice left in the tank. But we said, and I'll say it, I said that this passing offense was too big to fail based on the pieces that they have. Hayden, that proved to be false because it's failing now. And there's no way I can go out there in confidence despite the talent. And again, in full confidence, start the likes of Chase Claypool, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Deontay Johnson because it might fall apart against bad defenses. And this is a good defense they're facing.
Yeah, what we saw earlier in the season is Big Ben wasn't throwing the ball deep, but defenses were still at least somewhat concerned, especially when Chase Claypool was running around like a madman. But in the last couple weeks, the defenses are saying, fine, just run these crossers over the middle and throw the ball. And that's why Juju and Deontay just keep dropping these passes and get lit up because they worried about getting their heads cut off because the only play in the playbook right now is like a 5-foot or a 5-yard slant and some like meshes. And that's just not good enough in the NFL. So Deontay Johnson's still the wide receiver 13. It pains me to say it. In fantasy usage over the last month, he is for sure locked in. I think Juju Smith and Chase Claypool are trending in the wrong direction. The matchup's not great for any of them, but the Colts, the way that their defense is set up is they play cover 2. They like giving up passes underneath. So I'm kind of curious to see what the Colts are going to do defensively because it's kind of what they're kind of playing into what the Steelers want to do. And I think I trust the Colts coaching staff to like figure something out here because I think they're one of the most organized teams in the league on both sides of the ball. And I think that they're quite frankly better than the Steelers right now.
And for Ben, we talk about Baker having a high floor. Like, of course, you trust Baker over Ben this week. Don't even think about that. The matchup is better. I just don't want to go into the championship game thinking that Ben will solve all of our problems. The runs got closer to the passing game. 20 running back carries, and it was mostly Benny Snell, 18 of them, compared to Ben's 38 attempts. Who knows if that sticks in this game because we also think, although we have respect for the Steelers defense, like Hayden said, the Colts offense is clicking on all cylinders, and just you can't really stop them right now.
And that's what I wanted to ask you, Daigle. Again, we like this Colts offense. We don't like the Steelers offense. We like the Colts defense. We don't like the Steelers offense anymore. So, like, how much, and let's inverse that, like, how much should we downgrade the Colts offense going against the Steelers defense, which at points this year has been great, but I would say in the last few weeks has not, because this Colts team is one that we really like at this point, right? We really like Jonathan Taylor. Nyheim Hines is still being explosive, and we went into last week really liking T.Y. Hilton as well.
Yeah, and Jonathan Taylor's the big one here. 21 touches per game the past month of the season, over 100 yards per game on the ground in that span. It seems like they are certainly trusting him more and phasing Jordan Wilkins out altogether. And although T.Y. Hilton didn't really pop last week, it's still only a 2-man passing game between Hilton and, to a lesser extent, Michael Pittman, who's on the field but just not getting many targets. So overall, I think it's Taylor, the player that you hopefully have in your fantasy championship game, because that's the guy who's going to win this game single-handedly for them.
Love it.
Yeah, I think Jonathan Taylor's still an RB1 this week. I mean, the Steelers are very tough. As we know, overall defense, an extremely good run defense. But part of the Steelers' offensive collapse has been over the past 3 weeks, they're bottom 4 in time of possession. They can't sustain drives at all. And teams are just dominating time of possession against the Steelers. And maybe even if it's not like a high YPC day, not many big plays, I mean, the Jonathan Taylor is still very easily in like that 18 to 20 carry mix. And no matter the defense, if he's getting that kind of workload, like you're going to get big play opportunities. And I still really, really trust Jonathan Taylor's workload because this is no longer a 3-man committee. It's a much more traditional bell cow and change of pace backfield approach.
And the Steelers are missing like 3 starters on their front 7, like Bud Dupree and some linebackers. So it's not like it's by no means an easy matchup, but it's not like the craziest, most difficult matchup you've ever seen anymore, honestly.
Let's close out that 1 o'clock window with the Denver Broncos and the Los Angeles Chargers. This game's at 1 o'clock. That's weird. 48.5 Chargers, 3-point favorites at home. Patrick, let's talk about it. Justin Herbert, Austin Eckler. How's this one going to play out against the Broncos defense that we've seen this before, and Vic Fangio has confused some opponents, some quarterbacks. We know, I mean, not quite to the level of like a Bill Belichick or a Brian Flores, because, I mean, the Broncos keep losing defensive pieces. But Justin Herbert, while, you know, there were long stretches, he was a top 5 fantasy quarterback. We've also had some lately where he has not been that.
I mean, he seemed slump proof, like the one rookie who like would never have a down game, and then he had the 3 or 4 weeks where it was like a mega slump. And John Gruden, you know, late season John Gruden took care of that. So yeah, Vic Fangio is one of the best defensive game planners in the NFL. Still, the Broncos defense is like a little bit of that Cardinals factor this year. There's not much talent. Like they don't seem like a stay away unit, but sometimes you don't. People just seem to have disappointing days against them in fantasy. A lot of the Chargers, I guess, just depends on the health. Keenan Allen, whatever the heck that was, he'll be 9 days, maybe 10 days. I guess this game's Sunday. 10 days healthier. Hunter Henry didn't practice earlier in the week. I don't think there was any concern there. I mean, Austin Eckler did not look anywhere close to 100% healthy, I thought, on Thursday Night Football in Week 15. So the Chargers, they're a team I'll be interested to see the injury report at the end of the week. Maybe we can get any coach quotes on like the state of the health there, because but Justin Herbert, I mean, I still have top 10, top 11 at a quarterback position that this doesn't feel very deep right now, actually. So yeah, I mean, Justin Herbert, I think, had a pretty decent game against the Broncos earlier this season too. I'm seeing it. He had 2 turnovers, but he had 3 touchdowns. So nothing terribly concerning here, but I would like to check in on the Chargers' health.
That's why I like the over a lot in this game. It's because the Chargers will be 10 days removed from their last game, so I'm not too concerned really with the injury report. And then Locke, we saw him tear up the Panthers defense and then come back to earth against the Packers, unsurprisingly. The good thing is, though, that he only has 3 passes, 20-plus yard downfield the past 2 games, and we know that's where he's worst. That's what he usually loves to do, but that's where he's terrible at throwing the ball. So we reel that in, let him complete passes on the intermediate level where he actually is accurate. And without Joey Bosa, who I don't think we should expect to play, 2nd concussion in the last 8 weeks, I think a lot of players go nuts here, and I like this total a lot.
Yeah, the total has dropped from 50 to 48.5, Daigle. So maybe that makes you like it even more. And I'm a dummy. This game's actually in the 4 o'clock window. You know, I finally make my first mistake in one of my final shows. So, you know, it's just.
You're fired. You got to leave January. I'm sorry.
You could have made a elaborate excuse. Actually, you know, the Mountain Time Zone, they don't do daylight savings time. And so that's why. And
we didn't really say anything, Hayden, about Denver. Is there anyone, Hayden, who like jumps out from a usage standpoint? I mean, Jerry Jeudy scored 2 touchdowns on basically 3 receptions or 3 targets a couple weeks ago, but that was, you know, one Panthers cornerback is bad. He's slow. That was KJ Hamler who did that and scored 2 long touchdowns. Anything else about Jerry Jeudy, prayer yards, Melvin Gordon, so on and so forth?
The receivers and fantasy usage over the last 4 weeks, wide receiver 65, wide receiver 79, wide receiver 84. I don't see how you can play any of them. Noah Fant's the guy, 28% target share in the last 4 weeks. Tight end 5 in fantasy usage and PPR points over the last month. He's starting to get a little healthier, I hope. He had like that flu game, or I don't know if he visited like some pizzeria that poisoned him like MJ. But yeah, I mean, Noah Fant has like insane upside every single week. And I think that next year we're going to be drafting him a lot because I think people are going to discount that he was playing through these injuries. And I think that he's healthier now. So I would start him as a tight end 1 for sure.
Daigle, why you like the over in that game? I like the over in this next game. And let me tell you why. The Carolina Panthers, the Washington football team, a total of 44.5 with Washington as 2.5-point favorites. I know on Washington's side, no Antonio Gibson, almost certainly no Alex Smith either, but you're getting Dwayne Haskins probably, throwing to Terry McLaurin, who can beat this coverage, throwing to Logan Thomas, who got like over 10 targets last week, and J.D. McKissick, and Scott Turner, who probably wants his revenge on this Carolina team, versus the Panthers the Panthers passing offense, which is at full force. Teddy Bridgewater, Curtis Samuel, DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson. And we know that the strength of Washington's defense is their defensive line. We also know that Joe Brady knows that, and he will try to get the ball out of his hands very quickly. Daigle, again, I think this game goes over 44.5 because both offenses can have strengths against the other team's weaknesses.
That's fair. I don't really have a good spin on this game. The only thing I would say is that Mike Davis, unfortunately, we saw on Saturday that they tend to be trying to involve Rodney Smith more. I thought it was a fluke, but no, the past 3 games now, he's been eating into Mike Davis's carries. So that seems like it's going to continue this one. Thus, Mike Davis can't really be trusted as a low-end RB1 for the fantasy playoffs, more as a usage-based RB2, and hope he's involved inside the 10-yard line. But we know where the ball is still going to go. Him to a lesser extent. And then, of course, DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson. Maybe Hayden has more of a lean on this, but DJ Moore has clearly emerged as the player being targeted more in the last month when playing together with Anderson.
Yeah, just because the Panthers pass the ball so much, all 3 of the receivers right now are in the top 25 in fantasy usage. It is a little more complicated because some of them have been out, some have been in during that same stretch. But I don't know how you can bench any of the 3 in this matchup. I know the front 7 is a concern for Washington, but their secondary isn't all that great. So, yeah, you're going to plug in all the Panthers guys.
My concern is definitely like Chase Young just like completely ruining Teddy Bridgewater's day. I do think that's in play for a player, that has no ceiling over and over again in fantasy. And hey, do you have any lead on who should be ranked higher, Robbie Anderson or DJ Moore? Because Robbie Anderson, I'm not going to name names, but could have used a bigger effort last Saturday in Green Bay. Might have cost me a season. But I feel like doing the rankings this week, because all year Robbie had like the better connection with Teddy Bridgewater, but yet now I feel like I just don't know who to rank higher.
I honestly don't have a too big of a lean between them. I know Robbie Anderson's averaging 13.8 expected fantasy points since Curtis Samuel came back in the lineup like in week 8 or whatever that is. So I don't think he's like a must-play wide receiver 2 anymore, but I think that DJ Moore, Curtis Samuel, and Robbie Anderson's like all like upside wide receiver 3s. Ranking them is going to be basically impossible because their roles just keep changing, honestly.
One final note, Brian Burns is going to be out for Carolina, and we know that he is absolutely their best pass rusher. I think Dwayne Haskins has a good day. That can easily come back to bite me. Do not clip this statement. But we have seen him, and we saw, I think it was in the second half of last week, where when he's not pressured, he can throw the rock. Like, he can throw the ball. And again, these Panthers corners are not good. Scott Turner is going to know how to create space and find the gaps in this offense. Logan Thomas is now emerging. J.D. McKissick can win in the receiving game. I like it. I like the
I got to say with Dwayne Haskins, if that was his celebration for a game where he had under 300 yards and 55 attempts, what would he do after a win is all I want to know.
It's a fair question, Pat. What would you do after a win, Pat?
Diet Dr. Pepper. I've gone down to 8 ounce games instead of 12,
Okay, let's move on. We'll keep this show rolling, and we'll go to the Philadelphia Eagles and the Dallas Cowboys. Philly on the road, 2.5-point favorites, total of 49.5. I know with Pat and with you, Daigle, we've talked a lot about Jalen Hurts, and I will repeat the line we've said in each of those videos. He might not be the one that got you here, but he might be the one to win it once you are here, because Jalen Hurts last week, over 100 yards rushing, over 10 rushing attempts, threw the ball like over 40 times, I believe, as well. And now he gets a Dallas defense where his rushing upside and acumen is going to be really beneficial, I think, to the whole Eagles offense.
29 carries the past 2 games, 28.5 fantasy points per game. I've been waiting for us to reach this point because I want to go around the table and make a Jalen Hurts line. I've decided that I would definitely start him over Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson, and Justin Herbert. I keep coming back to Kyler Murray and Lamar Jackson. I'm at the point where I think I would start him over Lamar Jackson. But Kyler Murray with the rushing floor as well, it depends on what we think about team totals and how these game scripts go. But what we know right now early in the week is that the Eagles have the highest increase in their team total of any team in week 16. It's week 16, right? Yeah, week 16. Whereas they're nearly 26 points now, usurp the Chargers and a few other point totals on the board. So I just think Hurts against the Cowboys is a top 3 option, and it's just a matter of who is he going to start over, not Patrick Mahomes, but I'm listening to anyone else.
That is my line. It was Lamar Jackson and Kyler. I still have just ahead of Hurts. I have Hurts as the QB5. I mean, he had the 6th biggest fantasy performance of the season in his second career start. And as Josh is hearing me recycle a line, that was in a game that wasn't a smash spot in the Cardinals. And the Dallas Cowboys are a smash spot. So, like, you can think big. Like, the sky can basically be the limit. But, with Kyler Murray off the injury report, running more again, I can't start him over Kyler. And this is with the way Lamar is running right now. I mean, Lamar is kind of back almost in 2019 mode. I can't start him over Lamar. But I'm starting him over all those people you mentioned earlier, Russell Wilson, Justin Herbert, etc. And he is a top 5 option for me.
My one wrench in this is Josh Allen, because Josh Allen is the focal point of that offense. They're not going to go out there and really probably run Devin Singletary and Zach Moss against the Patriots defense. I mean, we've seen all the points really flow through Josh Allen this year. And I understand in the past, Pat, that Bill Belichick and company and Steve, we always need to mention Steve, have given Josh Allen a little bit of a headache, but I would say that was a far less talented team, and this New England Patriots defense is not going to be with Stephon Gilmore this week. So I would have Josh Allen over him this week as well.
Allen versus Hurts was one I really did struggle with. I mean, this is kind of like the final boss for Josh Allen. He's never had a good career start against the Patriots. Even earlier this season, he only had 11 completions, and the Bills win. Like you said, the collapsing Patriots team, no Steph Gilmore. I do think Josh Allen gets there this week, but I do like Jalen Hurts just slightly more.
I like Hurts slightly more than Allen as well. But that's where we're at. It's Hurts, Lamar, Kyler, and Josh Allen. That's the group he should be in inside the top 5 or 6.
Bill Belichick is Bowser, is what we've just come to on this podcast. Anything else we need to say about that game, Hayden? I mean, on the Cowboys side, the backfield situation, the backfield question is just such a massive one, because we would love for just Tony Pollard to play so we could play just Tony Pollard. But if Zeke goes in, part of me still wants to play Tony Pollard, even if he's only going to get 10 to 15 touches, but it just makes the decision so much more difficult.
It's impossible to know right now. Like, I'm not fully buying that Zeke's going to play. I think he is, but we'll have to wait. I'm not sure if I can play Tony Pollard if Zeke's in the lineup. I'm not sure if I can play Zeke just because he's Zeke right now. So, yeah, the Cowboys, we're going to have to kind of circle back for our Sunday show, honestly.
Cool. And then Miles Sanders is a strong start, obviously, because once he's next to the hip of Jalen Hurts, it just makes sense for both of them to be able to run over this Mike Nolan-led defense. Pat, anything else you want to say?
Just say with Miles Sanders, the past 2 weeks, his backups have totaled 5 touches. So they've thankfully ended this committee since Jalen Hurts became the starter.
And again, if you just in case you can't tune in Sunday morning, it does seem like Zeke is trending towards playing. And if that is the case, I would expect him to outtouch Pollard. But Pollard probably still to outscore him on fewer touches.
Hey, not to circle back to you, but I will, because Amari Cooper, I think last week got like 3 targets and 2 catches and like 9 yards and did absolutely nothing. Meanwhile, CeeDee Lamb returned an onside kick and had a lot of volume himself, and Michael Gallup did some stuff too. Are we back to just not knowing what to do with this Dallas wide receiver group? And it's, again, against a Philly secondary, which is one we want to attack this year.
Yeah, last week it was a season low fantasy usage for Amari Cooper, but the Eagles play a lot of man coverage, and if I'm trusting any Cowboys receiver to just win one-on-one matchups all day, it's going to be Amari Cooper. So I think that he's a wide receiver 3 with plenty of upside. Michael Gallup and CeeDee Lamb, we know those guys are the secondary pieces. If you need them as a flex, I get it, but their floor is much lower than that.
Let's go and close out the 4 o'clock window, Pat, with the 9-5 Los Angeles Rams coming off a loss to the New York Jets, a total of 47.5, facing the Seattle Seahawks, who are 1.5-point favorites and are still 10-4. Pat, this game has so many layers to it. Again, I mentioned the Jets loss by the Rams. You also have Seattle, though, which Russell Wilson over the last, 4 weeks has basically been fantasy irrelevant despite many people starting him. Like, he hasn't helped you when you're weak. And then you also had the added addition of DK Metcalf versus Jaylen Ramsey. What grabs your attention in this game?
Yeah, I mean, what do we expect from Jared Goff in this game? Because the first time they played the Rams was a week 10 or 11. He had a 300-yard day, but he had no touchdowns. And this is a Seahawks defense that has been performing much, much better against the pass, and it's been against a very, very soft slate. But where does Jared Goff fall in that? Is he part of a soft passing game slate at this point? And so Jared Goff is someone I really did not know where to rank. I think I settled on like QB 15 or 16, but I mean, to Russell Wilson too, then, I mean, he's produced more than one score in just one of his past 4 games. He had 0 touchdowns against the Rams in week 10. And we know all about the history of Russell Wilson heroic fantasy performances and low volume, but I don't think we can rely on that at this point, especially against this defense. And so I feel more secure with Russell Wilson. Is just he's like a take it or leave it low end QB1 at this point. Whereas Jared Goff, who was just terrifyingly bad, especially in the first half last week, I feel very uncertain what to do with him against the supposedly improving Seahawks pass defense.
DK Metcalf, 2 catches, 28 yards earlier this year when he played against Jaylen Ramsey. And I was asked in my waivers Q&A, DK Metcalf or Ayuk. And at first I laughed at it. I was like, DK Metcalf. Then I thought again. I was like, well, Russ fresh off a season low in air yards per attempt, not going downfield at all. I would expect the same approach this week since Aaron Donald presents a same challenge as Washington's front 7 did single-handedly. So, maybe Metcalf definitely moving down the rankings, but I don't know where you have him ranked, Pat. He's certainly a scary start this week.
He is. I haven't settled on his final rank. The receiver. I told you guys before the show, don't ask me a single question about receivers.
Which you actually did. That was an actual statement that came out of your mouth. I want the people to know.
My initial feel on DK Metcalf was like the wide receiver 7 to 10 range. But, I mean, that was a full-on erasing in week 10.
Right.
It's so hard with some of that kind of upside to drop them outside the top 12. But when I do the deep dive later Wednesday, I won't be surprised if I settle on like lowest end wide receiver 1. But all in, I will not drop DK Metcalf out of the top 12. It doesn't matter, even if it's Jaylen Ramsey. Like, he has as much big play potential as anyone in the league. And he's the kind of guy who can still win a week on only 2 or 3 catches.
Hayden, am I stupid? Am I dumb for thinking that the Rams win this one? I mean, it's opened as 2.5. It's down to 1.5, down to 1 in some places. I just like how they line up against the Seattle team right now.
I mean, I can see it. The point spread's similar. They're both well coached. Yeah, I don't really have a problem with picking the Rams in an upset here. I think going back to Metcalf, I think I'll have him more as like a low-end wide receiver 2. Maybe I'm a little more concerned about the matchup. I don't really care that much about wide receiver corner matchups unless it's Jaylen Ramsey. I mean, this guy is just built different. I mean, we can't ignore just because we want to throw out wide receiver cornerback matchups that Jaylen Ramsey isn't unlike any other corner in the league. So I do have some concerns. I think it's just going to be kind of a low-scoring defensive battle, which is kind of crazy just because that's not how it was working early on in the year. But they're both playing down in pace, and the team totals are like 15 and 19 this week. So, yeah, I think there is reasons to have DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Russell Wilson, Jared Goff, all of them down a tick. I still have all the faith in the world in Robert Woods. I think that's the player I'm most confident in this week is old Robert Woods.
I just would say with DK Metcalf and fading him too far, it's just wide receiver doesn't feel like terribly deep right now. And it's like, do you get DJ Moore ahead of him for sure? Do you get Brandon Cooks ahead of him for sure? You have Terry McLaurin, Corey Davis. It's just kind of a weird wide receiver too, where there's a lot of guys who could have huge games, but it's hard to pinpoint who. But I totally understand. Like Hayden said, I mean, this is not a normal wide receiver cornerback matchup. So if you fading him further, I do understand the thought process.
Cam Akers left. He only missed 3 snaps in the second half, but still out of the lineup for a little bit of time last week. And Malcolm Brown out-snapped Darrell Henderson 16-7. But at the time when Cam Akers left, the Rams were down 20-3. And if you think the Rams hang around or win this game, and I'm with you, Josh, I actually have already bet early in the week the Rams outright. I think they're the better play in this one. I'm not worried at all what they did last week. Then that would be a Henderson game since Malcolm Brown's the pass-catching back. So you're asking who to replace Cam Akers with? I think it's Darrell Henderson this week.
All right, let's go to primetime games. Tennessee Titans, Green Bay Packers. What a game on Sunday Night Football. A huge total of 56 in this game. Tennessee 10-4, Green Bay 11-3, and they are 3.5-point favorites. Hayden, down to you. I mean, both these teams, I should say, it seems so narrow. Is there a player outside of, let's line it up for Tennessee, Ryan Tannehill, Derrick Henry, A.J. Brown, Corey Davis. On the Packers end, Aaron Rodgers, Robert Tonyan, Devontae Adams, Aaron Jones. Anyone outside of there that you're interested in? Or are these, again, the identity of these teams are so well known, that both sides are very solid plays this week.
Yeah, I would add Jonnu Smith to the tight end 2 mix if you didn't name him. And I think this isn't for season-long championships, but Allen Lazard's getting more run as the number 2 over Marquez Valdes-Scantling. And if I'm playing like DFS showdown, I would prioritize Lazard over MVS. But yeah, well, I'm keeping an eye on Jamal Williams. He left last week, and that was the reason why Aaron Jones' usage went way up, because he wasn't splitting time anymore. So that's the other thing to keep an eye on, because if Jamal Williams is out for whatever reason, I haven't seen the practice reports yet, Aaron Jones would go back into like the top 3, top 4 running backs, when the last couple weeks he's been like more of like a mid-range, low-end RB1.
Daigle, I asked that question to him about periphery options. Now I want you to name the player that you are most confident in on either side for these teams.
All of them. But I guess if I had to pick one, we have to keep DeHimber going, because we know the Packers invite running backs to beat them. 4.5 yards per carry allowed to opposing running backs, and the second most receiving yards to running backs. Having said that, if you open the door for the Titans offense and Derrick Henry, they're not going to get cute. They may run some play action on you here and there, but they will gladly put it into Derrick Henry's belly and let him run wild. And on the other side of the ball for the Packers, the Titans, we know, just don't have the healthy bodies right now to be able to reach the quarterback against any offensive line, let alone Aaron Rodgers, who has been surgical in every game except for that one Bucs blip on the radar earlier this year. So I just think there are going to be points galore in this matchup. A potential NFC Conference Championship preview.
Well, one team's in the AFC.
Oh, yeah. No, sorry. Okay. It's week 16. A potential Super Bowl preview. How about that? Even though
it could be
the case, but that's
the Packers are very, very close, Pat, to nailing that NFC home field advantage down. And I mean, we look at where the NFC spectrum is right now, Pat. Despite their defense, despite the obvious concerns they have, some holes on the roster, I might say I believe in the Packers team more than any other on the NFC side.
Just with the level Aaron Rodgers is playing, and the first player in NFL history with 3 40 touchdown seasons, like almost averaging over 8 yards per attempt every game, almost 3 touchdowns every game. Just focusing back on this game, the one player I have a question about would maybe be just Corey Davis, who he's cleared 6 targets only 2 times in his past 7 games, and one of those was 7 targets. Hopefully, you would think this is one of those games where those targets will spike and getting him as like a top 20 option, because I have him ranked as a top 20 option. Just the stratospheric over under. But he was the one kind of like brand name player in this game where I didn't feel absolutely certain. It's just because the yards have mostly been there, but the usage has just left a little bit to be desired. Maybe not. Maybe Hayden's usage model will tell me the targets are coming in the money areas of the field. But he was just like the one brand name player in this game where I just didn't quite know where to put him.
What's crazy about Corey Davis is he's like the 3rd most efficient receiver in all of the NFL, like yards per route run. In my model, he's averaging like 4.5 more PPR points than you would expect per game. That's like, I think, second only like behind like Devontae Adams. And we're talking about a crazy baller all of a sudden. And the one issue, if I was going to have an issue, is the Packers play cover 2 in quarters. And I'm not sure if they're going to win a lot of these deep balls on these play action. This isn't the type of defense that is just going to like be falling for all this play action. So I am with Daigle. I think it's going to be more of a Derrick Henry game. Obviously, I'm not sitting Corey Davis or A.J. Brown. They've been too good. But I wouldn't be surprised if this wasn't like some massive blow-up spot for either one of those receivers.
I have a theory. Corey Davis stole Tyler Lockett's life force and is the new Tyler Lockett based on the way Hayden just described him. It's science. It's fact now. I'm
excited to see A.J. Brown take like a 7-yard drag and take it to the house.
Yeah.
I feel like that's absolutely happening in this game.
And that's why Corey Davis is having a good year, right? He's finally playing next to an actual 1A, whereas he can just be the secondary receiver. If he lands somewhere where he's going to be asked to be the number 1 receiver for a big-time deal because it's his contract year, like that's one of the easiest players fadeable in fantasy next year, like David Montgomery. Anyways, though, what I will say about this game is that A.J. Dillon, we know the NFC is inferior to the AFC. Having said that, the Packers can still lock up the number 1 seed with a win here. And if that's the case, A.J. Dillon would likely play in Week 17 to get Aaron Jones a rest. So if your league still plays into Week 17, 1, email your commissioner and tell him to stop that crap. And 2, pick up A.J. Dillon just to get ahead of it.
All right, let's close out this Week 16 with the Buffalo Bills and the New England Patriots. Buffalo Bills, 11-3. 7-point favorites on the road, and the Patriots are not making the playoffs here, Pat. we kind of talked about that Josh Allen conversation, but it's important because the state of the Patriots is unlike one that we have seen in the last decade and a half. This is a team that's not making the playoffs this year, that doesn't have the roster pieces that it used to on offense and specifically on defense, Pat. Some of that is opt-out, some of that is injuries, some of that is they've become like elderly people. But, it's Josh Allen to Cole Beasley, Josh Allen to obviously Stephon Diggs. I mean, this really makes me excited for this late Josh Allen MVP push that he's making.
Yeah, it's just Josh Allen to everybody, even Gabriel Davis. So John Brown's on injured reserve, right? So he's not even in the mix for this game.
No. Practice window was open before last week, so he could actually return this game.
So yeah, the Patriots, just going back to the Patriots, first time since 2008 they missed the playoffs. Where they went 11-5 that year. So yeah, unprecedentedly poor Patriots team. And yeah, we already said this earlier in the show, but Josh Allen has basically surmounted every obstacle this year. He's proven every point that he's now an elite player in the NFL. He just needs to have a good game against Bill Belichick. And even if it's because the Patriots defense is so depleted, no Stephon Gilmore, I think it does happen for a Bills team that just seems like they're getting better every week. Basically smelling blood, like narrative street, whatever. This is a very symbolic game. Like the Bills beating the Patriots here, that's like the completion of this project, of the turnaround of the Buffalo Bills franchise. And I think we can have faith in a big-time Josh Allen performance.
So they never do this. They don't use their running backs at all. Even so, they run the fourth highest rate of play action in the league, which is what talking heads on TV should talk about, by the way. Not the fact that you establish the run and then it opens up the pass game. It's the opposite. Brian Daboll continues proving it, and yet no one's talking about it. Anyways, if they're missing Stephon Diggs and John Brown this game, it would not be shocking at all, actually, if it's not a Josh Allen game, because Daboll's an intelligent human being, and he attacks and he runs the Patriots over. We've seen him get steamrolled in an island game against Cam Akers 2 weeks ago. We saw last week the Dolphins choose to do that, and they just had their way on the ground in the front seven. And so I do wonder if Daboll depends on Moss and Singletary rather than trying to attack through the air if Diggs is not out there.
Galaxy brain right there.
Yeah,
well,
maybe.
I have some evidence of this. I was looking at how do you predict like offense's neutral pass rate, and I was looking at defenses, and what I learned is offenses are choosing to pass the ball depending on how good the opponent's run defense is, not how good their pass defense is. And what's happening here is offenses come out, they can see, can I just run the ball? Because if an offense just decides, yes, I can just run the ball nonstop, they'll do that. And against the Patriots, like you said, with Cam Akers last week, that's what the Rams exactly did, because the Patriots can't stop the run. With that said, the Bills are still a pass-first team. Start all the studs. Start Cole Beasley. Go on and on. But I do think that there could be a little bit something towards teams are deciding to run the ball over the Patriots because their pass defense is way better than their run defenses. And offenses, if they can run the ball and that's just working, they'll continue to do that. So I think there is a little something to that, Dave.
Maybe my bias is just getting in the way because I haven't seen anything special or exceptional or even exciting about Zach Moss this year. Devin Singletary is a fun player. He can put his foot in the dirt, make lateral cuts. He does a great job, I think, of reading his blockers. And maybe they do that. And I mean, again, if we can go crazy here a little bit, maybe they want to show that they can do that before the playoffs start. So teams have to be a little more honest when defending this. But if John Brown is out there and you're back to these four wide receivers, I also wouldn't put it past the Bills to be like, oh, you have owned us for much of the recent years. We're going to put 30 points on you real quick. We're going to do that in 3 quarters.
We don't like to get into narrative street, but it's very hard to ignore like the symbolism at play in this game and like what it will mean for the Buffalo Bills. I could definitely see that.
Changing of the guard. It is true a changing of the guard moment where the Patriots are not making the playoffs this year. The Bills have won the division and they're about to make the playoffs. And I mean, for how much pride that area has in their team for that to happen. And then you put, I don't know, a 35 burger on the Patriots. That's absolute potential, I think, in play here.
Tables will be smashed after this game.
Tables will be smashed. All right. I guess we'll get out of here because there's no reason to talk about any Patriots. That's going to do it for us. Sunday, noon Eastern, Rotoworld Live, served by Applebee's. Oh, join us. If you never have, take time. 45 minutes leading up to until kickoff will help you set your optimal lineups, set your perfect lineups. And again, we'll have a show, the game-by-game recap show on Monday morning as well. And we'll be back Wednesday afternoon with this same exact show, a Week 17 preview.
I don't know. Just tune in for that one because I'm definitely having wine. Like, how do you preview Week 17? Josh's last show also on a Wednesday. Like, just
it's gonna be some wine time.
We're gonna burn it down. We're gonna burn it down.
We got a little German pet Nat out here. We're gonna have some good times.
Okay.
We're gonna have some good times. All right, all of you. Speaking to you three, enjoy your holidays. Pat, hope the kids have a wonderful time. The other two, hopefully you have a great day and a great weekend. And everyone out there, thank you so much for the support. Thank you so much for listening to us all year long. Again, we'll be back here on Sunday. Up the Villa. Talk to you soon.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.